Welcome, everybody. My name is Aiden, and I'm a librarian here at Sunnyvale Public Library. Thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation on Holi, the Festival of Colors, Joy, and Equity. Our speaker tonight is Pushpita Prasad, a Hindu educator and storyteller and longtime Bay Area resident. Pushpita will be teaching us about the meaning, history, and traditions around Holi. All right, Pushpita, please go ahead with your presentation.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Very excited to be here. Namaste. And it's my pleasure to be talking to all of you today about one of my favorite festivals ever, which is Holi. And I'm going to try and make this as smooth as possible, but I think after the last 2, 3 years, we're all pretty used to the world of Zoom. So apologies in advance if stuff freezes or doesn't work as it does, and if the transitions are not quite as smooth as we can. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So hopefully everyone's seeing, I don't know, are we seeing a good view of the screen, just like we brainstormed?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So I think let's just start with I just like to start with a quick of how we all welcome Holi Hai, which quite literally translates to celebrate, it's holy. And I think Holi is one of the most iconic festivals. It's become really quite well known, so much so that the imagery associated with Holi has sort of almost gone beyond the festival, and you see it start to proliferate in a lot of imagery. I'm always amused when I see it. Um, but I wanted to just take a moment to remind everybody where that imagery and where that exuberance comes from, because Holi really is one of the most ancient and joyous Hindu festivals, and is also a significant cultural marker in the Indian festive calendar season, and we have a lot of festivals. It's actually a time for renewal, hope, and fresh beginnings. Um, I guess you could think of it as the equivalent of, May days and Easter and carnival celebrations all rolled into one. That might be one way to think of it. We don't do things by half measures generally. So, what is Holi, I guess? I think, as I also already mentioned, it's a very unmistakable, iconic uh, festival that's kind of taken on the moniker of Festival of Colors. And I think most of you, even those of you who have never taken part in a festival, would sort of recognize the imagery. And it generally it comes around at the sort of onset of summer. Now I know that doesn't feel like summer right now, given the horribly cold winter that we've been having. But in the Indian subcontinent, this is quite literally the time that spring is fading and summer is about to begin. And so it's really a time when, if you think about spring at its peak, right? It's at, the flowers are at the glory, and people are sort of like getting the most out of their lives before summer sets in. But I think the other part of Holi is why it's considered a festival of new beginnings is not just the time of the year that it comes at, but also it has a very important element in terms of like a time for fresh beginnings, a time for letting bygones be bygones. It's a time for breaking societal barriers. It's a time when class barriers and gender barriers and family barriers and age barriers, they're all sort of put aside for one day of going a little crazy. And it's a day when you were even in more traditional rule-bound societies. It was a time to kind of literally let down your hair and let the colors fly. And it was a time to kind of get perky and take some, liberties with people with whom you might have otherwise a super respectful or maybe like a very boundaried relationship. So it's really a explosion of colors in more ways than one. So, some basics. When is Holi? So I think this is where things get a little interesting. If you look at the Georgian calendar by which we live, it sort of tends to move around a little bit and falls in March, April. But it's actually got a very precise date in the month. If you look at the Hindu calendar, which is a lunar calendar, and it comes in the month of Phagun. It's always in that month. It's always at that specific time. And like I said, it celebrates the advent of summer. And if you think about how agricultural societies worked, this was a time when people were sort of a little bit more relaxed because they would have, the crops would have attained maturity. Not yet quite harvest time, but the anticipation of harvest time is there. So there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of pride and work well done, looking forward to some of the bounty that comes from a well known harvest. So it's really a time that people sort of put out a last hurrah before sort of settling in to get the harvest in and then settle in for some pretty brutal months of summer, because the summer in the Indian subcontinent can be very, very hot. I think and one way to look upon it is, if you think about traditional European celebrations, there would be a similar sort of explosion of joy and color around the winter equinox, before the grim reality of winter set in, since winter was brutal in Europe. Holi also is known by many different names, and I think that's something you'll find, that any festival, any tradition from India or anything to do with Hinduism is never going to make it easy and come by one name. It's going to come by multiple names, because given the ancient nature of the festival and their faith, we've been around for like 5,000-10,000 years, and so many different communities approach it in different ways. There'll always be multiple stories associated with a festival or a special day or a tradition, and every different community will approach it with their own different ways. So while Holi is the most popular name for this festival, it's also known by other names like Phagwa, Dulendi, Rang Panchami, Hola Mohalla, Kama Mahotsav, and many, many more that I don't know, and I'm not going to get into. But I think I always like to take a step back, and as we looked at some of the current day imagery from Holi, one thing to remember is that when you see an image of Holi, or when you partake in Holi yourself, you're actually joining an ancient indigenous tradition that has an unbroken recorded history of at least 2,000 years. And I said recorded history because obviously, if you go back into oral history, you can trace it much further. But if you look at a recorded history, you'll find numerous mentions of this kind of celebrations, whether it's some ancient Hindu scriptures dating back to 500 BCE, 300 BCE, and then stone inscriptions starting from 300 BCE in different parts of India, Ramgarh being the oldest. And then again, in terms of the continuity of this culture, this sort of celebrations, there's actually a very, very famous and ancient Sanskrit drama called Ratnavali. And in that drama itself, the author sort of describes what's going on with Holi and how the characters are sort of playing with Holi with each other. But even more interesting, is that if you look at descriptions of this festival, again, as travelers visited the ancient Indian subcontinent, many of them made note of this very unique festival. And I wanted to just call out one, which was noted by this Italian traveler called Niccolo di Conti, who came by in 1420 AD, and he came to what is today the city of Hampi. It was in the southern part of India. Holi today is more associated with North India, but when this traveler visited in 1420, he basically described a festival which I think sounds quite similar to the way I'm describing Holi today, talking about 3 other festival days during which they sprinkle all passers-by, even the king and queen themselves, with saffron water, placed for that purpose by the wayside. This is received by all with much laughter. So you start to see some of the threads of what I was talking about. It's a day for general merriment. It's a day when people douse themselves with water and color and douse each other. And you can see with his reference of you can throw water even on the king and queen, which goes back to my earlier comment that it was a day when the normal barriers and protocols that people live by were sort of put aside in the best spirit. And I think that spirit shines through even today. If you ever have the fun of being in India during Holi, you'll probably get wrapped into it, whether you like it or not, because it's just the way things are. The king and queen were not spared. I don't think you're going to be spared either. But I love his reference to saffron water, and that's kind of unique to the area that he was describing, Hampi. But again, when you talk about unbroken traditions and threads that continue over various millennia, I want to share a picture of Hampi today. And again, Holi is prescribed by many colors. But if you see this picture of Holi in Hampi, you'll still see that there is this preponderance of saffron color. And so I think if Niccolo de Conti was to visit us today, and if he was to visit the ruins of Hampi today, he might end up making very similar observations. No king or queen around, but in every other way, the festival remains pretty same. And I think to the point of the ancient poets who wrote Ratnavali, if the ancient masons who sculpted these inscriptions back in 300 BCE were to drop by and to time travel, they probably feel quite at home in a modern day holy celebrations. And I think that to me is really fascinating when you think about threads and rituals and traditions that are that ancient and unbroken. So not going to I forgot to mention this to you, Aiden, but I thought I'd mix it up a little bit, and I don't know if people have a way of sending in any answers into chat, but I just thought I'd see if people were paying attention and just ask them, did you guys pick up in which month is Holi celebrated? And I don't know if there's a way to text that into chat or just use the Q&A button. That's fine too.
Yeah, everyone should have the chat function at the bottom of your screen.
Okay.
All right, we have some answers coming in.
Yeah, I see some C's, so thank you for paying attention. These are not meant to be tough, but I would like to make sure nobody's drooping off during my presentation. So, all right, let's move ahead. Not being able to move ahead. Okay, so when we talk of festivals, like I mentioned, there's a lot of ancient traditions, more than I could that I know or I could bother to recount myself. But there are a couple that are like really, really popular and spread across vast swaths of the Indian subcontinent. And the most popular really is around this boy, a young boy called Bhakt Prahlad. And Bhakt quite literally means a devotee, and Prahlad was the name of the boy. So he was the son of a really powerful emperor, Hiranyakashipu, who had, through a combination of military power as well as divine powers that he had gained through extreme penance. So, he had done a lot of extreme penance and asked for a boon when he was he said, I want to be so powerful that nobody can kill me. I don't want to be, I want to, I want to say that I cannot be killed at home, outside, not during the day, not during the night, not by any weapon, nor by somebody on the ground, nor in the sky, not a human being, not an animal. So when he asked for this boon, Hiranyakashipu thought that he had sort of covered all bases because he had asked for protection from being killed by a human, an animal, on the sky, on the ground, at home, outside, with a weapon. So he thought he had covered all his bases. Obviously, having gotten a boon like that, he became very arrogant and very tyrannical, and basically began to terrorize his subjects. And his ego grew to a point where he basically said, I'm so powerful, there is no need for anybody to worship anybody except myself. And so he sort of began cracking down on his subjects, forbidding the worship of anybody. But like all good tales, he was thwarted in his quest for the single-minded pursuit of being the sole one worshipped by his own son. His own young son turned out to be a staunch devotee of Bhagwan Vishnu. And like any frustrated father, first the king tried very hard to change his son's mind, but failed. Then he took to trying to punish him, giving him various kinds of threats and trying to, coerce him into changing his mind. And when everything failed, in desperation, he turned to his sister, Holika. Now, the princess Holika had her own story. She had also done a lot of penance, and she had been granted a boon that she was basically given a cloth or like something kind of like what I'm wearing, right? A cloth that was that could be draped around her, and when draped around her, she was supposed to be protected from burning flames. So the king entrusted the job of like scaring or killing his son, who was being completely disobedient, to his sister. And so his sister took on the fairly morbid task of killing her nephew and sat down in a pyre. But the devotion of the boy Prahlad, the prince Prahlad, he was basically, divine intervention, and the veil that was supposed to protect her got blown away with the wind, and she burnt to ashes, and the boy got saved instead. So obviously, like all good legends go, that is a commemoration of how no matter how powerful evil may be, no matter how unpregnable something may look like, there's always a way to get through, and ultimately good always triumphs over evil. So, because Holika's boon had sort of rested on the assumption that she would not use it to cause harm. So, when it was misused, her boon ended up protecting the boy, the devotee Prahalad, and not her. So, this is an event that is still celebrated and that sort of has given Holi its name, the moniker coming from Holika. I won't get into a tale, but if you remember Prahalad's father, the tyrannical king Hiranyakashyap, he met his own unique end soon after, but that tale is not part of Holi, so I won't go into that. The other folks, I don't know, folks on the call, many folks have heard of Bhagwan Krishna. So he is one of the most popular deities in the Hindu lexicon, and has actually inspired generations and generations of Indians. The antics of his childhood, of his adolescence, have inspired poets and sages and people writing dramas and painting pictures through the ages. And I'm just showing here a beautiful picture that I think dates from the 15th century, which shows Krishna, who you can see here, marked out in the blue skin, because Krishna quite literally means the dark one. So painters would depict him with a blue skin, and he's playing with his friends, and he had a bunch of friends with whom they would tend to have a lot of fun play together. And so with his favorite friend being Radha. So Radha Krishna are even today worshipped as sort of both a divine couple, but also people who transcended, and had a divine friendship that has continued to inspire folks. So Radha and Krishna were very fond of playing with colors with each other, and their antics continue to inspire Hindus today, especially, as I'll show later, some pictures from the very villages where these folks are supposed to have lived. The celebrations in the villages where these folks lived centuries ago is something that's absolutely spectacular and just like another world experience. But we'll get to that later. So talking about colors, right? I've spent a lot of time talking about colors. So where did these colors come from and what exactly are they about? So traditionally, I remember I talked about Holi coming at the advent of spring being at its max, at its peak, So there was a lot of stuff that nature was giving to folks to use and make their colors. And traditionally, all these colors you see came from natural sources. So like turmeric or marigold giving the yellow and the oranges, saffron coming from a traditional flower called the tesu flower, blue coming from the hibiscus, henna leaves giving green, or lots of leaves giving green, and then soaked beetroot giving some bright purple magentas. And for those of you who care, you can actually don't have to go through all that effort today. You can buy little packets like this. I don't know if it's coming through in my screen. I think Zoom's acting up a little bit. But you can buy a lot of these colorful, fun packets and have fun with them yourself at any time without having to pick a lot of fruits. But if you go back to when I was talking about, if you think about it, this was also a very holistic way of using what nature's bounty was around. Because if you think about what was going on, each of these plants and flowers carry a lot of medicinal qualities as well. So in a way, folks were sort of harvesting the goodness of all the fruits, flowers, and things around them, and sort of using it in very interesting ways. I think, given the problems we have with allergy season today, some definite interesting stuff going on there. And then, of course, no festival is complete without a lot of feasting. And Holi comes with its own specific set of foods. Again, a lot of variations across regions of India, bears what. But as in the modern era, Holi is most exuberant in the northern parts of India. And so some of the foods that I've shown here are really iconic from those states. And I hope some of you had a chance to try some of these. If not, go check out your friendly neighborhood Indian store or Indian restaurants. And I think you might recognize a few of them. And then this one I have to talk about. So this is a drink called Thandai. And it's actually very interesting. California legalized cannabis a few years ago. But this was actually a drink that sort of would often be spiked with cannabis to kind of add to the whole, the sort of psychedelic and sort of sensory experience that Holi is all about. But in general, it's also made with a lot of massive number of nuts and spices, all of which come together to have a cooling effect on the body. And hence its name Thandai, quite literally the thing that cools. Uses like peppercorn, almonds, fennel seeds, poppy seeds, saffron, cardamom, rose water. So like a real explosion of flavors. If you can ever find a packet of Thandai in your Indian store, or if you have a restaurant, I would highly recommend trying it. It's probably like nothing you've ever tasted before. The other thing before we move on from food is the emphasis on community. Because if you, as you can imagine, when people were going this crazy with colors, as you've seen in some of the imagery, obviously you get quite dirty and grimy, and you're sort of coated in stuff. So you're not really ready to sit down for the equivalent of a big Thanksgiving meal or a fancy plated dinner. But all that holy playing, which is very exuberant, is a lot of if you probably get hungry, or you probably want to feast on stuff. So there, this is all, as you can see, a lot of like finger foods that was very easy to grab, and every house would have some, as you stopped by, you went to different people's houses, you smeared color on all your neighbors, on all your friends, and every house would have its own set of goodies set out there for you to maybe grab a bite and get some energy before you go on to attack the next house with color. And I think the emphasis on community, that like this was a day when you could walk into like a stranger's house, or a community gathering, and really there's not a lot of formality around the day. You can expect to partake in the joy, you can expect to partake in the goodies. And I think it just sort of adds to that whole feel that this is the day you all come out of your houses, you're taking part in a sort of communal experience, and you're all adding into that communal experience in your own little way, whether it's through food, whether it's through color, whether it's through smearing each other with color, many different ways to participate. Okay. So the music and dance of Holi. So Hindu culture is very, very closely intertwined with music and dance, and India has a very, very deep and elaborately developed tradition around it, both classical and folk. And Holi in particular has inspired a massive genre of music and dance around it through the ages. And folk songs for Holi are just like prolific, and they cover everything from like your interactions with your day-to-day neighbors, to the tales of Radha and Krishna frolicking with each other, to different deities playing Holi with each other. And these songs are very prolific, and they also inspired Bollywood. I don't know how many of you know Bollywood, which is a very prolific and famous film industry from India. It's actually bigger than Hollywood. And Bollywood, sorry, has been inspired by these songs and dances of Holi from the time it was formed way back in the 1940s. And Holi songs and dances have really proliferated through the music, starting with the black and white era all the way into the modern era. Now, I did have a little clip video that I was going to show, but I think it got corrupted. So I'm going to move on, and I'll try to send it later. It could be put in the link or something. Because when Aiden and I were trying to look, I was like, oh man, it sounds awful. So I don't want to share it as an example of Holi songs, because then you guys will think it's crappy music that we play on that day. So let's talk about what actually happens on Holi and how do we actually celebrate it. So while the Holi is actually like most Hindu festivals, it's a multi-day festival, and it actually starts the celebrations sort of start the day before with what is called Choti Holi, or small Holi, or Holika Dahan. Now, I hope you all remember my story of Holika, which I told a little while ago. And this is what inspires it the evening before. Holi is all about community. So, and on the first day can be no different, right? It's actually where the community starts to really come together and prepare in a big way. Though pretty much in traditionally the day, the whole community, especially the kids of the community, would spend the day collecting wood, twigs here, there, and things that they were like wanting to get rid of their house, like some things in your house that you want to get rid of. It was like, here's a bonfire of everything that I want to get rid of. And it's a way of like burning away my, like things of the past in a time for new beginnings. So the whole community would come together, as you can see, and collect these twigs, collect driftwoods, collect stuff that was lying around, and then sort of light it. And as they lit it, obviously, they would sing their special songs that are dedicated to this. There's special drumming sequences that are dedicated to this, and the whole community would come together to sort of pray, to crack jokes, offer certain ritual foods. And before they did all of this, like any good festival, they would have cleaned their houses, they would have dressed up in new clothes, and sort of really commemorate the burning of Holika and the rescue of her small nephew Prahalad, which sort of symbolizes the victory of good over evil through the power of devotion. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody had asked about the foods pictured. I did not see your question. I can come back to it later. Is that okay, or do you want me to go back, Aiden?
I think we can go back to it at the end.
Yeah, we'll go back to it at the end. All right. So, so the evening before Holi starts with this bonfire, which is sort of a community bonfire, and it's Holika Dahan. Sorry, guys, not sure why my computer is freezing. And then here's the big one, the explosion of the colors on the second day, which is known as Rang Holi, which is Rang is quite literally color, the day of colors. It's also known as Badi Holi or Dulhendi. And unlike a lot of festivals, so a lot of festivals, the emphasis is, you get together as a family, you'll get together in your house. But Holi, as you see, is all about getting together, getting outside of your house and playing across your community, whether it's, gender, class, whatever, your things might be. It's a time to set aside differences. And in all ways, it's the great equalizer because you're quite literally drenched in colors, that it doesn't matter if you are like, the pauper of the town. It doesn't matter if you're the richest person in town. You're all going to end up looking equally crazy at the end of it. And that's kind of deliberate. I'm sharing here some images. I think I talked about the, how certain sections of India and North India sort of recreate the joy and fervor that was reflected in the stories of Radha and Krishna as they played Holi together with their friends. And this is an image of a place called the Bake Bihari temple, which again relives the joyful play of Radha and Krishna. And this temple literally celebrates it for like 40 days. And these crowds come, like every day the temple attracts crowds of like several thousand folks who come together, and there's like color flying from multiple levels. I don't know if you guys can see. There's a level up here. There's actually a level even above from where the color is pouring down. And there's like dried powder being thrown. There's buckets of color being thrown. People are dancing. There's probably drumming. There's probably incense burning, music playing. It's like a multi-sensory experience. And I think this whole multi-sensory experience really acts as it really kind of amplifies the spiritual and helps you connect in a very personal way with the divine, and it's just quite an out-of-body experience. So, time for a quick quiz. What does the Holika bonfire commemorate? As always, just put your answers in the chat or Q&A so I can make sure folks are paying attention. Anyone got some guesses? You can see some answers coming in. Yep. B it is, the rescue of a minor child from murder by fire. So, moving on, I think as I talked about it, one of the things that really characterizes Holi is diversity and inclusion. So this is a time, India in general is a place that is just bursting with diversity of every kind that could be. It's often said that multiple centuries live in the country at the same time, and I think that's certainly true. And it's quite literally a day when no matter who you are, you're going to get assured a colorful welcome. And you can often find people even just walking the streets. You might get doused with color. You might get a water balloon thrown at you. It's all part of the spirit, and people will be like, "Bura na mano, Holi hai," quite literally asking for your permission, saying, don't mind, it's Holi. So you can see that on that particular day, it literally doesn't matter. I wanted to just call out a few celebrations that are totally unique. So we talked about the suburbs and the villages and the towns where Radha and Krishna lived. And what you see here is a very unique way of celebrating Holi from the village where Radha used to live. So Radha lived in one village, Krishna lived in another village, and they would go to visit each other. So today, the men who live in Krishna's village still go to visit Radha's village, and the women in Radha's village quite literally meet them, and it's sort of a ritual play where they're quite literally whacking them with these sticks, and the men are allowed to use these shields to protect themselves. So again, sort of capturing some of the fun and back and forth that happens when friends kid around with each other. But it's again a way for communities to connect and for some of the traditional gender roles that people assume to sort of fall by the wayside with communities having a lot of fun. And then another temple in that same area, which is the town of Vrindavan. Here, it's Holi takes on a different flavor, and instead, in addition to colors, they're sort of playing with petals. So this is called the Phulovali Holi, or quite literally the Holi of the flowers. And this just if you can imagine the quite intoxicating scent of these massive millions of flowers pouring down on people, along with the music, the dance, the colors, and the spiritual ecstasy that's all around them. And in the southern part of India, Holi is celebrated as Kam Mahotsav, which is honoring the god of love. So again, a different flavor, but many different things, a lot of things going on at the same time. And I think just to wrap up the many different flavors of celebrations, so they're different. So you can start to see how Holi, while it's all about colors, starts to show up very differently in different parts of the country. I'm having some technical issues, so do you want to allow a couple of questions?
Pushpita, are you able to bring up the picture of foods?
Yes, I am going to go back. Sorry, guys, I just had I figured there was going to be some food. Yeah, let's talk about food. This is the fun stuff, and it's dinner time too. This is like a fried. The best way to describe it is like a fried empanada, but it's stuffed with like some really. It's like sweet. So if you think about milk and you boil milk till all the liquid is gone and the solids remain, and then you roast the solids and then you mix it with like delicious cardamom and nuts, and like it's really quite an explosion of flavors, and you stuff it into dough and then you fry it. So as you can see, it's extremely time intensive, and making it is again a community project, because the preparations for Holi would begin like a week in advance, with the whole family coming together to make these things, kids helping, everyone helping. So it's like a lot of fun to make this together. There are a lot of fond memories of like 6 people sitting like in an assembly line doing different parts of this very elaborate sweet, which is generally made at home. So that's a sweet. This is another kind of sweet that's banana and flour mashed together, and then fried and dipped in syrup and obviously decorated. So it's kind of banana bready, but it's really tasty in a different way, different texture. But if you think banana and flour mashed together and fried into these little discs and dipped in sugar syrup. This one I had talked about. This is the drink called Thandai, which is really made out of like, I don't know, like lots and lots of spices, peppercorn, almonds, fennel, poppy seeds, cardamom, rose water, saffron, all combined together with some milk and water, and it's just like it's really hard to describe what this sounds, what this feels like. It's just like an explosion of flavors in your mouth, and all of these spices are pretty cooling. That's why the drink gets the name Thandai, which is to cool you down. This on the side is actually a savory dish. This is called dahi vada, and dahi is yogurt. So these are like lentil paste dumplings, fried and then dunked in yogurt that's been flavored with like salt and cumin and spices. So another explosion of flavors and of savory side. Really, really delicious. Does that answer the question?
Pushpita, do you have a Bay Area restaurant you recommend for folks who want to try these out?
Dahi vada is going to be pretty commonly available. I think if you go to, if have folks heard of chaat houses? There's like Chaat Pavan, Chaat Cafe, Chaat whatever. If you go to any place that calls itself chaat something, CHAAT, they'll have dahi vadas. And dahi vadas are pretty common in most Indian restaurants. Um, Gujia is going to be pretty hard to find. You might find it at, so in right on the border of, like, actually in Sunnyvale, right? There is this store called Rangoli Sweets on the right on the edge of Sunnyvale and Santa Clara. So there's a place called Rangoli Sweets. They generally keep this during Holi because it's so iconically associated with Holi, but not the whole year round. At least not always. This this dish is quite literally a homemade dish. I have actually never seen it in a restaurant. You do get very fancy sweets in a restaurant or in a sweets shop like Rangoli, but this pua is kind of a simple, easy to make dish at home. So it's not the kind of dish people would really buy outside. And every house had its own flavor. And Thande, honestly, is quite hard to come by in the Bay Area, even despite the proliferation of restaurants we have here. So, because some of these things are very seasonal, even in India. So, but dahi vada is going to be very easy to get, and gujia should be fairly easy to get to. You actually might get frozen gujias now that I think about it. So, like if you go to a store called Madras Groceries on Bernardo or Apna Bazaar, sometimes in the frozen section, they'll be having this stuff too. But a great way to sample the flavors of these kind of foods is, like I said, go to places that call themselves chaat house, chaat bhavan, chaat cafe. Chaat literally just means like a snack. And so all of these things are very snacky, and some of these are very specific and sold around like the festival time. But dahi bada you'll find the year round, and these are like things that people like to snack on, or street food. It's quite an explosion of flavors. I would definitely recommend it. They are generally vegetarian only places, but honestly, you won't miss the meat in there at all. You're so busy like eating and stuffing yourself with different things that it's you're not going to miss it. Because we did have a couple of, I wanted to talk about Holi in the Bay Area, which is sort of where I ran into technical issues. So as we wrapped up celebrations of Holi in India, I wanted to talk about how Holi has actually truly gone global. Um, and it's, you can find extravagant Holi celebrations in many, many parts of the world. And I actually wanted to see, let's see if I don't have technical difficulties now. I wanted to share a clip of a Holi celebration right here in the Bay Area. So let's hope this video works. So this is actually a celebration that happened right here. And you can see that this is a bunch of your neighbors together, throwing color on each other, going a little crazy. There's generally a lot of dance, some of the snacky foods that are being sold. DJ here, the music going. So what you see the kids with here, these are called pitchkaris. Well, these are water guns. But traditionally, people used to play with these kind of squirt guns called pitchkaris. And so they would quite literally fill them with colored water and spray them on each other, throw water balloons. And so it's good to see our kids are keeping up the tradition. It's a lot colder here. So I do really appreciate kids play with water here, because it's not as fun as playing with water when they play on the Bay Area is lucky that most times it's warm enough to get chilled. Not this year, this year. I'm going to a Holi celebration on Saturday, and I'm totally dreading the rain pouring down. And if you Google, if you just go to YouTube and Google Holi, you will find masses and masses of videos. You can Google Holi in a village, Holi in a city, Holi in Bay Area, Holi in Australia, Holi wherever, and they'll all have their own unique flavor. Go back to my.
Pushpita, it was a little hard to hear you while the video was playing, so I'm not sure if there's any of that you wanted to repeat.
Oh, I was just saying that what I showed was a little YouTube short of a celebration of Holi in the Bay Area right here itself. It might even have been, one of the high schools here, or it might have been the Baylands Park. There are thanks to the, there are now like multiple Holi celebrations that happen on the weekends before and after. So the festival of Holi was actually yesterday. And so the Hindu temples in the area, so, there's like 2 or 3 Hindu temples in Sunnyvale, several in Santa Clara. A lot of them hosted community celebrations the past weekend. So Saturday or Sunday, a lot of the temples hosted celebrations, and members of the community came and had these big celebrations. But there are a lot of other organizations that also host celebrations that you can just buy a ticket for, $5, $10. Sometimes it's free. There's one coming up there's several more coming up this weekend. I'm going to one that's organized by a group called the UPMA, UPMA, Uttar Pradesh Mandal of North America, and they're going to be hosting it in actually, I think the SAP stadiums or the ground surrounding it. So I was just making a joke about, that video I showed you guys was from last year. And in the Bay Area, we're usually lucky enough to have good weather. Like at least it's not crazily cold and it's nice and sunny. So, you could see that people were really getting into it, squirting each other with water, traditional water guns that are called pitchkaris, having a lot of good time, celebrating with dance, music, going crazy. And so any of you who want to partake or get a sense of that, feel free to, buy a ticket, or some of them are free, and just drop in. You'll find that the community is extremely welcoming. It doesn't matter that you don't know anybody. If you end up in these celebrations and you have a clean t-shirt or shirt, we'll be like, oh my God, you haven't, looks like you haven't come here yet. So they'll make sure that you'll soon look undistinguishable from anyone else. So Holi typically, is truly one festival where you just show up and you're part of the fun. And then, interestingly enough, this was something I discovered when I was putting together these slides and researching something. So it's a very unlikely city, a very unlikely place in Utah. There's a little town called Spanish Fork. And while it might seem unlikely, they do claim to actually host the largest Holi festival. And they say it's the largest Holi festival, including India. Now, that's a little surprising. I'm not sure how you can verify it. But they say that they draw close to 70,000 attendees. And
Pushpita, I think you want to switch your view again. Did you have more to say about the Spanish Fork Festival?
yeah, so I was just going to say that it's kind of, you'd think that the biggest festivals happen in the Bay Area or something, but interestingly, that distinction is held by a little town called Spanish Fork in Utah. And there is a big ISKCON temple there. And I think just pre-COVID, the celebrations they were holding there were attracting about 70,000 people, which is kind of boggles the mind to think about that many people coming together to celebrate Holi in Utah. So I think they actually say this might be the largest Holi celebration in one place, which again is quite a fascinating thing. I've never been there myself, but if you check out the videos of it, it just seems like spectacular. So for those of you who want to experience Holi at a massive level, there's many ways to experience it. You can go join a neighborhood celebration this weekend, the following weekend. You'll honestly have Holi celebrations for the next 3 or 4 weekends right here in the Bay Area. You can check out what Spanish Fork in Utah is up to, and you can maybe plan a big planning to go to one of these Holi celebrations in a couple of years in India, which is really quite unique experience. I think I just had one final quiz, and that was what does based on everything that you guys have heard, what do you think the festival of Holi sort of symbolizes? What are some of the main things that come to mind when you think of Holi imagery, or what should come to mind going forward when you think about it? Again, text in your answers, A, B, C, or D. Pretty easy one here. And yep, all of the above. So, questions?
Okay, I'll start it off while folks are thinking. Besides presence in the broader community, what do you think are the major differences between how Holi is celebrated in India versus here in the Bay Area or in other parts of the world?
Well, I think the biggest thing one faces is the time shifting of the celebrations. So in India, Holi is quite specifically played on the day of Holi. Those of us who are more exuberant, and by the way, I was a terror playing Holi when I was a kid. I would literally go and, like, as a teenager, I would literally go and drag my friends who were not so willing to play Holi out. And, I remember going to one friend's house and saying, hey, you better come out or I'm going to throw like the colors right here in your house. So the poor boy guy, of course, came out. And, that was but so you might see the holy exuberance like building up the week before, and you might get the odd water balloon thrown at you from like kids who are a little too enthusiastic. But really the celebrations are sort of confined to those 2 days, because there's a lot of astrological and spiritual significance on why those 2 days are chosen. Now what happens here living in the Bay Area or anywhere else outside is that obviously Holi is not a holiday. So most of us, all of us are going to school, to work on that day. So then we end up time shifting our celebration to, like I was saying, the weekends before and the weekends after. And this is something that actually happens with all our festivals. So Diwali, you'll see the same thing happen, or all the festivals, because folks will be in office or school, which is kind of unfortunate. So then you tend to end up celebrating, especially if you're doing a community celebration, uh, on the weekends that come closest to it. If it's a personal family celebration, you could still do it at home, right? But if you think about hundreds of people or even dozens of people getting together to play and smear each other with color and sort of get that community vibe going, that's going to be really hard to do on the day off. So I think that is the biggest thing. The other big thing is, of course, the weather. So, like I said, in the Bay Area, we're still lucky. Normally, it's nice, but if you think about parts of the East Coast, there's still snow and blizzards going on. So it gets pretty impossible to play any kind of a Holi with snow, and so they tend to time shift their celebrations even more. Like sometimes you'll find the community coming together to organize a Holi celebration in like April, which is like a month after or 6 weeks after. And that leads to a lot of, our relatives in India, our friends in India heckling us a lot, because sometimes when we'll share our Holi pictures, they'll be like, what Holi are you guys celebrating? Are you celebrating the Holi for 2023, or are you like celebrating next year's Holi in advance? They'll be like, what the heck are you guys doing? Holi was like weeks ago. It's sort of like celebrating Christmas in end of January, and people will be like, what the heck are you doing? So I think that's the biggest difference. But I think wherever Hindus get together as a significant community, you'll start to see these celebrations start to build up. And the communities are small, you'll probably find them, like 5 or 6 families getting together in a backyard or in a small temple. As the community grows in strength and size, then they start taking over more elaborate celebrations. And that's why nowadays in the Bay Area you'll find lots of parks that get booked for these kind of events, formal events run by a lot of different nonprofits. So the one I'm going to on Saturday, and I'm keeping fingers crossed that it's not so bitterly cold, the organizer was telling me that some 7,000 people have registered to come and play Holi. So it should be quite the experience if the weather gods cooperate.
Thank you. I have another question for you.
Yeah, please.
If one of our attendees wanted to celebrate Holi in northern India, where would you recommend that they visit?
Um, so you will probably, just given logistics, you'll probably land in Delhi, one of the big international airports in North. Honestly, Delhi has crazy Holi, so you could do it right there. But if you want to get more adventurous and you want to get into some of, so when you see Holi in Delhi, Holi is a very I'm sorry, Delhi is a very modern city, so it'll basically be people coming out and playing in their, in all the streets and neighborhoods and things like that. And so you will get doused, believe me. If you're in a hotel, you can ask your hotel to tell you to go somewhere. Your hotel will probably give you small decorous bits of color, but they obviously don't want to trash their property by playing massive Holi there. But they'll tell you where to go, no problem at all. But if you want to get into that truly sort of spiritual, multi-sensory explosion of the thing that I was talking about, then you have to sort of travel to a state called Uttar Pradesh, UP, and that is where you find some of these really ancient temples which sort of recreate the frolicking of Radha and Krishna. And these are literally the cities and towns and villages where these historical figures lived. So people take a lot of pride in saying, I am from the village of Krishna, or I'm from the village of Radha, or I'm from the village of Vrindavan where they used to play together, or things like that. And so there's a lot of recreation of that, and that's where I showed some of these images from. But honestly, you could be like, there's like a dozen cities you could go to, if you're just planning a trip and you find yourself in Jaipur or in Calcutta or whatever, that there you would have the experience you're looking for. Holi is really popular. And I wish I could have shown you guys that video, because it was gave a lovely flavor of how Holi has changed, even in the last 50 years. But unfortunately, that video got corrupted. So YouTube actually flagged it, so I had to like download it, because it used some Bollywood songs, and they're like, oh, copyright violation, whatever. So then I had to download it, and I think in all that downloading and uploading, the sound got corrupted.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in, and it is 8 p.m. So thank you so much, Pushpita. That was a wonderful presentation. And thank you
Yeah,
everybody for
thank
coming
you.
and joining us.
Thanks for joining, and I hope you guys all make sure to go out and experience Holi.
Well, after that presentation, I definitely want to. Hopefully the weather will let up a bit.
Yeah, if not, I think there's celebrations happening on the following, not just this weekend, but the weekend of the 19th as well, and probably later. So if you Google, you'll probably find plenty of events happening.
All right, have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you, Holi. Happy Holi.